Superman is perhaps the most iconic superhero to ever walk the grounds of a comic book, so naturally, that also means that his run in the comics is chock full of iconic moments. Here are top 10 iconic Superman moments. Number 10. Kissing Wonder Woman. For years, writers had always toyed with the idea of pairing Superman up romantically with Wonder Woman, but for one reason or another, the trigger was never pulled. DC finally decided to pull the trigger in Justice League number 12. After Wonder Woman returned to the Watchtower after an argument with a bedridden Steve Trevor in the hospital, Superman consoled her. In the midst of a heart-to-heart, the two started discussing their similarities, and then, for the first time ever, the two shared a kiss. Number 9. The Death of Superman. When sales for Superman comics started to decline, writers thought it was necessary to temporarily kill him off in order to highlight to the world just how important he was. It worked. Not only was the death of Superman an astronomical success, bringing in $30 million in one day, the image of Doomsday pummeling Superman to death stuck with viewers. The feelings the imagery brought on became mute when he was brought back to life, but in a time when comic characters did not return from the dead so frequently, this came as a huge shock for fans who thought it was over for one of the world's finest. Number 8. The Symbol. This won't be the last time we talk about Birthright on this list. Mostly because, for one, it is just an amazing comic story. And two, because this image from the climax of the comic is just too good to pass up on mentioning. Set during Superman's early days on the job, the final act sees Lex Luthor frame Supes for setting off what appears to be an alien invasion raging against Metropolis by androids with Superman's symbol. As Supes fights them off and tries to save civilians, the symbol from his chest is ripped off, but in a moment that proves Superman is more than just a symbol of hope, he uses a giant version of that symbol as a shield to save a little girl. Number 7. Killing the Joker. Whether you love or hate the idea of an evil Superman, one has to give credit to both the Injustice, Gods Among Us video game and the prequel comic series for committing to making Superman into an absolutely vile dude that you either want to hate or are absolutely horrified by. The writers committed to the idea and stuck the landing there. In the case of the latter comic, the most infamous image it gave us was an enraged Superman piercing his fist through the Joker's chest. The action was merely implied in the video game, but actually seeing Batman kill the Joker, who, appropriately, dies with a smile on his face, with a horrified Batman in the corner, remains unforgettable. Number 6. The Stray Bullet. We could spend all day talking about just how the Birthright miniseries is iconic in its own right, but let's talk about this series of panels from the 6th issue. Superman has rarely been a vengeful man. Rather than punish criminals, he wants them to understand and comprehend what they did wrong and hoping they never do it again. So when a girl is traumatized by a crazed man with a gun, Superman wants the man to understand what it feels like to be traumatized to teach him a lesson. So he picks up the man's shotgun, fires a bullet, and with super speed, catches it inches away from the man's face. Number 5. Lois learns who Clark is. Lois Lane had already become engaged to Clark Kent. Things take an interesting twist when Clark develops amnesia and Lois takes the opportunity to finally discover his secret identity. Lois finding out Superman's secret identity has happened countless times in media, but it all started with this issue. What reads as a natural progression in the relationship for us was once taboo to think Lois could or should learn his identity. But when Clark finally tells her, she accepts it and they get married. Number 4. Restoring the American Way. What's so funny about truth, justice, and the American way? Attempts to reconstruct the idea of the Superman character, while also providing commentary on the scope of more violent comic book stories succeeding over family-friendly ones. Here, a radical, violent group of heroes called the Elite enter town and challenge Superman's ideals of vowing not to kill. In the end, it looks like he nearly breaks his code, but instead, in a tremendous speech directed at the team's leader, he reiterates why people with morals like his are still important symbols in society as a source of hope and dreams. Number 3. The Boy Who Stole Superman's Cape. In Action Comics number 0, or better known as The Boy Who Stole Superman's Cape, it tells the story of Clark Kent's first escapades as an employee at the Daily Star prior to Daily Planet in Metropolis and as Superman. After one of his first missions sees Clark knocked out in an alleyway, young Luke stumbles upon him and steals his cape. Later on, Luke and his brother run away into the subway to try and escape their drunken, abusive father when Luke stumbles into the open tracks, but at the last possible second, is saved by Superman in one of the most powerful comic images to emerge in the last decade.
Number 2. Saving Regan.
Speaking of powerful images, this is one that we often see posted on social media during National Suicide Awareness Month/Day, because this series of panels from All-Star Superman resonated strongly enough with people like Gregory Paul Silber of Comics Beat, who say this story saved their lives. In it, young Regan is literally driven to the edge of a building with intentions of jumping. Superman is able to talk her down with a tough, honest, and most importantly, patient conversation. Superman is often defined by his powers, but it's quieter moments like this that reminds us of the inner strength he has to impact people's lives, in and outside of the comics.
Number 1. The first image.
We can't talk about iconic moments for Superman without talking about the very first issue of Action Comics, specifically the cover that introduced the world to a hero. There's a reason why this is one of the most famous comic book covers of all time. In a modern context, Superman running with a car over his head isn't a big deal.
It's textbook Superman.
But in the context of when it was first released, 1938 audiences had no idea what they were witnessing, and by immediately showcasing how different he was from other superheroes at the time, it immediately peaked in the character.
It's an extremely important moment for not only the character but the comic industry.